Tonight, we step into a medieval world where clothing was never just clothing. A brown wool cloak could mark a life of labour, a blue veil could whisper devotion, red sleeves could announce wealth or danger, and purple might be locked away like treasure. In the Middle Ages, colour could reveal your rank, your faith, your trade, and sometimes even what people feared about you. So before we begin this quiet journey through muddy roads, candlelit halls, market squares, and monastery bells, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy relaxing history stories like this. Now, settle in, slow your breathing, and let's discover what medieval clothing colours truly meant. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself at the edge of a walled town just as dusk folds itself over the fields, and the last light gathers on the wet stones like old silver. Your boots are heavy with mud, your cloak smells faintly of damp wool and wood smoke, and somewhere beyond the gate a bell begins to toll with that slow, hollow patience only medieval bells seem to have. Cold stone presses the evening air into your bones. Damp straw lies in the cart ruts. Smoke gathers beneath the rafters of nearby cottages, and horse breath drifts white in the winter air while torchlight shivers along the river mist. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience, assuming the brochure was a monk muttering directions while pointing at 3 identical muddy roads. And, gently, honestly, you probably would not last a week out here, not without warmer socks, better luck, and a much more forgiving stomach. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the gate creaks open, you may leave a small mark of your own by commenting where you're listening from and what the local time is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge beneath the town gate with your hood drawn low, passing under blackened oak beams banded with iron. Above you, a sleepy watchman leans out from the gatehouse window, holding a lantern close to his chest as if afraid the flame might escape. He looks first at your face, then at your cloak, then at the hem of your tunic, for in this place colour speaks before the tongue does. A man may claim to be honest, pious, wealthy, humble, or dangerous, but cloth has already whispered half the tale. The lane inside the wall is narrow, slick, and busy even at dusk. A woman in a brown wool kirtle hurries past with a basket of leeks tucked under her arm. A carter in weathered russet shouts gently to his mule, though the mule receives the advice with deep professional contempt. Near a shuttered stall, 2 apprentices in faded blue sleeves sweep straw and cabbage leaves into the gutter. Their elbows are patched, their fingers red with cold, and their caps droop like tired mushrooms. The town smells of tallow smoke, wet wool, horse dung, baking bread, and the faint sourness of ale spilled too many times on old boards. You notice that no garment is merely a garment. A hood dyed deep blue may hint at a family with coin enough to buy more than bare cloth. A red sleeve may suggest a guildsman proud of his trade, or a young man hoping everyone notices he has survived long enough to afford vanity. A fur trim at a collar speaks softly but firmly of rank, and it does not need to raise its voice. Even the plainest cloak, if well woven and unpatched, carries a kind of quiet dignity. Beside the gate, a toll clerk sits at a little table with a wax tablet, an ink horn, and the expression of someone born to disappoint travellers. He wears dark cap, not quite black, for true deep black is costly and not easily held in cloth. The dye fades, the rain steals it, and the wash water has opinions. His robe is more brown than black, yet he sits upright as if the shadow itself has promoted him. No one can quite agree whether he is feared because of the tolls he collects or because he looks as though he has personally audited every soul in purgatory. You step aside as a small party enters ahead of you, a merchant with a fur-lined cloak, his wife in a mantle of muted green, and a servant carrying a bundle wrapped in linen. The green catches the last light and glows for one brief breath, damp and leafy, like spring hiding inside winter. A girl at a doorway stares at it with open longing, while her mother tugs her back indoors, muttering that colours invite eyes, and eyes invite trouble. Some swear that bright cloth can draw envy like honey draws flies. Others say that a fine colour protects a person, because misfortune prefers the already miserable. Those who tell such things never fully agree, which is considerate of them, since agreement would make superstition far too tidy. The bells toll again from deeper within the town, calling the hour. The sound rolls over roofs of thatch and tile, over chimney smoke and crow-stepped gables, over a market cross-slick with rain. You follow it slowly, your cloak brushing against damp walls, your shoulder nearly touching baskets, barrels, and hanging signs painted with symbols for those who cannot read. A boot for the cobbler, a fish for the fishmonger, a sheaf for the baker. A golden cup for an inn that almost certainly owns no golden cup, unless optimism counts as metalwork. At the bend of the street, you pause beneath the timbered house leaning so far forward it seems to be listening. Rushes lie scattered just inside the open lower room, mixed with herbs to sweeten the air, lavender, meadow sweet, and a little mint gone brown at the edges. A beeswax candle burns near the door, cleaner and sweeter than the smoky tallow dips used by poorer folk. Its light falls across folded cloth stacked on a bench. Here are small measures of colour, dull red, cloudy blue, brown, grey. Yellowed linen, and one narrow strip of brighter crimson kept half hidden beneath the linen cover. The shopkeeper notices your eyes upon it and covers it more fully with one careful hand. Costly, his glance seems to say, though he does not say it aloud. Words can bargain, glances cannot be haggled with as easily. You move on, carrying that glimpse with you. In the slow pulse of the town, colour becomes a map. Near the wall, labourers wear the colours of field and ditch earth brown, smoke grey, sheep's wool white, the rusty shade made from madder when fortune allows. Near the shops, colours sharpen a little, as if trade itself has rubbed them bright. Near the church lane, blue hoods and pale veils drift toward evening prayer, and somewhere beyond the roofs, in the keep whose upper windows catch the last stain of sunset, richer colours wait behind doors, deeper reds, stronger blacks, perhaps even purple folded away in chests with iron locks. Your own cloak is modest, damp at the hem, respectable only by candlelight and from a forgiving distance. Still, it keeps the wind from your back, and in this town that is no small blessing. A stray dog emerges from beneath a cart, narrow as a shadow and mottled like old porridge. It sniffs your boot, considers your worth, and decides you may be followed. This is the first honest judgment you have received since the gate. Together you pass under a hanging sign and into the warmer breath of the main street, where the day's final business fades into murmurs. Doors close, shutters thump. Somewhere a lad shakes rushes from a hall floor, releasing dust, rosemary, and the ghost of yesterday's supper. From an upper window, someone shakes out a wool blanket, and you receive a fine medieval blessing of lint upon your shoulder. It is not official, but it feels ancient. The town settles around you, layered in colour and smoke. The poor wear what the sheep and soil allow. The tradesmen wear what coin and guild custom permit. The devout save their clean linen and best-dyed sleeves for feast days and saints. The noble keep their brilliance partly hidden, for power is often most powerful when glimpsed only in passing. You begin to understand that clothing here is not decoration alone. It is warning, prayer, boast, memory, law, and longing. Stitched close to the skin. As the bell's last note fades, you follow the dog toward a low alehouse where lamplight spills amber across the mud. Behind you, the gate is barred for the night. The clerk gathers his tablets, and the town draws its coloured garments close around itself like a great patched cloak against the cold. The dog leads you no farther than the alehouse threshold, where it sits with the solemn authority of a bishop and waits for someone inside to drop a bone. You pause beside it, one hand resting on the damp wooden post, and look back along the lane where the last traders are folding away their cloth, tying their cords, and slipping shutters into place. The town gate is barred behind you now, yet the smell of the field still follows mud, wet straw, turnip leaves, and the deep animal warmth of wool. A gust slides between the houses and lifts the edge of your cloak. It is not a noble cloak, not merchant blue, not proud red, not trimmed with fur, not lined with anything softer than hope. It is brown, or near enough to brown that no one would argue after sunset. In this town, brown is the colour of walking, hauling, mending, waiting, bending, and surviving. It belongs to people who know the weight of a wooden yoke, the ache of cold fingers, and the particular insult of mud finding its way into a boot that was already doing its best. You turn away from the alehouse for a moment, drawn by the slow movement of labourers returning through a side lane. They come in twos and threes from the outer fields, carrying mattocks, baskets, and bundles of firewood bound with twisted twigs. Their garments are rough wool, mostly undyed, in shades that seem borrowed from the earth itself: sheep grey, bark brown, oat straw beige, the rusty reddish tone called russet by those who like naming hardship politely. Some cloth has been coloured with cheap dyes from bark, roots, or madder, but rain, sun, smoke, and washing have softened everything into a tired agreement. You fall into step behind them, moving slowly as they pass under the leaning houses toward the poorer edge of the town. Their tunics hang loose from work-thinned shoulders. Their hoods are patched at the crown, their hose darned at knee and heel, their sleeves darkened at the cuff by years of labour. One man wears a belt made from old rope, and another has tied his shoe with a strip of leather so narrow it looks like a prayer pretending to be a repair. No one can quite agree whether patched clothing shows poverty or prudence, though among these folk it is plainly both. A good patch is not shame. A good patch is an argument with winter, and winter loses for one more day. You pass a low doorway where a woman crouches beside a wooden tub, rinsing cloth in water already gone the colour of weak ale. She scrubs with lye soap that bites the skin, then wrings the garment hard enough to make her knuckles pale. Beside her, rushes from the floor have been swept into a sour heap, ready to be carried out and replaced if the household can spare the trouble. The room behind her is lit by a tallow dip that smokes heavily, staining the rafters black. A pot of pottage mutters over the fire, thick with peas, onions, and something that may once have been cabbage but has chosen retirement. Her dress is brown wool, faded at the elbows, dark at the hem, and reinforced where daily life has made its opinions known. A linen coif frames her face, not fine white linen like you may see near the church, but yellowed, softened, and mended until it seems less an article of clothing than a loyal companion. Some swear that linen worn close to the head keeps troubling spirits from slipping into dreams. Others say it simply keeps hair out of the stew, which is also a holy service in its way. A child-sized garment hangs from a peg near the door, but the house itself is quiet, and the evening mood remains soft. The woman glances up, not afraid, merely measuring you as everyone here measures everyone: cloak, boots, belt, hands. Hands tell the truth when cloth tries to embellish. Your fingers are cold, but not cracked like hers. Your boots are muddy, but not split. Your cloak is plain, but still whole enough to suggest you've known better roads than some. The labourers move on, and you follow them toward the edge where houses grow smaller and gardens press against the inner wall. Chickens scratch beneath a cart. A pig noses at a heap of peelings with the steady optimism of a creature that believes all civilization exists for its supper. From a shed comes the dry rasp of a woman carding wool, pulling the fibres across iron teeth so they may later be spun into thread. Nearby, an old man turns a spindle with slow, practiced fingers. Wool begins as fleece, dirty and greasy from the sheep, then becomes washed fibre, carded fluff, spun yarn, woven cloth, fulled fabric, cut garment, patched garment, rag, and finally, if it has been very useful indeed, stuffing for a crack in a wall. Medieval cloth does not retire early. You duck beneath a line where damp stockings hang like defeated flags. The dog, which has decided the alehouse can wait, trots behind you with renewed interest. Perhaps it senses crumbs, perhaps it senses destiny. With dogs, the difference is often small. In a yard, a young field hand shakes mud from his tunic while his mother examines a tear along the side seam. The tear is not large, but cloth is precious. Even a poor brown tunic represents sheep, shearing, washing, spinning, weaving, cutting, sewing, and many hours stolen from sleep. She threads a bone needle by firelight and begins to mend it with dark yarn. Some swear that mending after sunset invites bad luck, because every stitch made by night may sow sorrow into the cloth, even now. It is hard to tell whether people believe this fully or simply dislike doing fiddly work when their eyes are tired. Either way, she mutters a small charm under her breath before drawing the needle through. You linger by the yard wall, feeling the warmth of the little fire against your knees. The labourer's cloak hangs on a peg, heavy with rain. It has no bright colour, no fur, no embroidery, no ribbon at the throat, yet it bears a whole life in its stains: green smears from hedgework, white dust from threshing, soot from hearth smoke, black mud from the road near the mill, and one pale patch where spilled ale has left a permanent memory of a feast day. To a lord, such cloth might be invisible. To those who wear it, every mark is a season. The town bell sounds again, lower and farther away now. It marks time for everyone, but not everyone receives time equally. For the wealthy, evening may mean candles, talk, warm wine, and embroidered cushions. For the poor, it means one more chore done by dim flame before sleep on straw or a narrow pallet. A woman folds coarse bread into a cloth and sets it beside a bowl of pottage. A man rubs his hands over the hearth, then checks the latch on an oak door swollen by damp. Iron keys are rare enough that many houses use bars, pegs, or simple wooden catches. Security, like fashion, is unevenly distributed. You notice how little these people own that is purely ornamental. A copper brooch may fasten a cloak, but it is useful first and pretty only if fortune has been generous. A strip of dyed wool at the edge of a sleeve may brighten a garment, but it also reinforces the seam. A hood may be cut with a long tail, partly for fashion, partly because even poor folk enjoy a flourish when the weather permits. There is dignity here, quiet as banked coals. Brown does not mean dullness when you stand close enough. It means walnut bark, wet ploughland, old oak beams, rye crust, smoked fish skin, and the backs of hands browned by sun and wind. At last the labourers begin to disappear into their houses. The woman with the needle bites off her thread. The old man sets down his spindle. The pig sighs in its sleep as though burdened by great affairs of state. You and the dog return toward the main lane, carrying with you the warmth of poor hearths and the smell of mended wool. Behind you, brown garments hang to dry by low fires, not splendid, not celebrated, but faithful as earth itself. Ahead, past the bend of the street, the church bell calls again, and a faint drift of candlelight spills from the parish door. Among the moving shadows, you catch the softer gleam of blue cloth beneath the bell tower, and your steps turn that way through the mud. You follow the bell toward the parish church, where the street widens just enough for rainwater to gather in shallow pools and reflect the trembling light from the open door. The dog trots ahead, pauses at the churchyard gate, and considers whether holy ground might contain dropped bread. Finding no immediate evidence, it sits beneath the low stone wall and watches you with the patient sorrow of a creature excluded from mysteries that probably smell interesting. The church rises from the town like an old grey ship, its tower blunt against the deepening sky. Moss clings to the stones, and the narrow windows glow with a dim amber that makes the mist around them seem almost golden. You pass under the lich gate and feel the ground change beneath your boots, from churned street mud to a colder, quieter path between grave markers softened by rain. A little roadside shrine stands near the wall, with a painted figure of the Virgin beneath a wooden canopy. Someone has left a twist of blue thread there, tied around a peg beside a wilted sprig of rosemary. No one can quite agree whether such threads carry prayers more surely upward, or whether they simply help worried hearts feel less alone. In the dark, both explanations seem gentle enough. Inside the church, the air is cool and heavy with wax, stone, damp wool, and old incense. Rushes have been scattered near the entrance to catch the mud from boots, though they are already losing the battle. Beeswax candles burn near the altar, their flames steadier and sweeter than the smoky tallow dips in poorer homes. The bell's echo still hums through the beams overhead, as if the whole church has become a wooden chest holding one long note. You stand near the back, close to a pillar painted with faded saints. Their robes were once bright, perhaps red, green, gold, and blue, but years of candle smoke have turned them soft and ghostly. The blue remains most noticeable, clinging to the Virgin's mantle in patches like pieces of evening sky. It is not the richest blue in the world, not the deepest ultramarine ground from precious stone and carried across long routes by merchants with guarded purses. Here it is humbler, perhaps from woad or a cheaper pigment, yet it still draws the eye. Blue has a quiet power. It does not shout like red or command like black fur at a lord's collar. It gathers attention slowly, like dusk gathering in the corners of a room. Villagers kneel or stand in small clusters. A woman from the market wears a blue hood carefully brushed clean, though the edge is frayed. 2 apprentices have washed their hands and changed into tunics with sleeves dyed a faded blue-grey, respectable enough for prayer and perhaps for being noticed by someone standing 3 pews away. A widow near the front wears a plain dark dress but pins a narrow strip of blue cloth at her throat, close to the skin. Some swear that blue protects against fever, envy, and the wandering glance of ill luck. Others say it belongs to holy things because it resembles the heavens, though anyone who has walked in winter rain knows the heavens are often the colour of dishwater and bad decisions. You settle against the pillar and let the murmur of prayer move around you. The priest's voice rises and falls near the altar. A server trims a candle with careful fingers. Somewhere behind the rude screen, a small metal chain clicks softly. The scent of damp wool grows stronger as more townsfolk press inside, bringing the weather with them in their sleeves and hems. A man removes his cap and reveals hair flattened by a coif. A woman smooths the front of her kirtle. A boy old enough to work but not yet old enough to look comfortable in his own limbs rubs at a stain on his blue sleeve, spreading it wider with tragic dedication. Near the shrine of the Virgin, a seamstress kneels with a scrap of cloth folded in her hands. You saw her earlier, perhaps, beneath the leaning timbered house where colours were stacked on the bench. Now her face is lowered, and the blue scrap catches the candlelight. It may be an offering, it may be a promise, it may be something she hopes will be blessed before it is sewn into a garment for a bride, a child, a sick mother, or a pilgrim leaving at dawn. Those who tell such tales never fully agree, but in a medieval town, cloth often passes through more prayers than a priest on a feast day. The blue around you is not all the same. Some garments are pale as washed flax under a cloudy sky. Some are smoky and grey from age. Some lean toward green where the dye has taken strangely. A merchant's wife near the front wears a mantle of clearer blue, lined with white wool at the edge. People do not stare, exactly. They glance, then look away, then glance again with the careful modesty of those who have noticed something expensive and do not wish to be caught noticing. Colour is never private here. A bright garment steps into a room before the person wearing it, sits down, and begins making claims. Yet blue also softens rank. Under the painted Virgin, the wealthy and the poor seem, for a little while, to be gathered beneath the same imagined mantle. The merchant's wife and the widow both bow their heads. The apprentices stop fidgeting. The seamstress presses her cloth to her lips. Even the toll clerk appears near the side aisle, his almost black cap in his hands, looking much less powerful without his little table and wax tablet. You feel a small, sleepy amusement at this. Remove a man from his paperwork and half his thunder leaks out through his shoes. The priest blesses the people, and the words ripple through the nave like water over stones. A woman touches her blue thread, then touches the pillar beside her, perhaps to carry a little holiness home. In some villages, people sew blessed scraps into collars or hems to ward off sickness, bad dreams, or the sort of misfortune that enters through gaps in common sense. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the cloth is believed to protect the body, the soul, or simply the courage needed to rise in the morning. You suspect all three may be useful. When the service ends, the congregation moves slowly toward the door, careful not to slip on the damp rushes. Outside, night has thickened over the churchyard. The dog rises from beneath the wall, having survived its exile with noble restraint, and joins you at once. The blue thread at the shrine stirs in the wind. Behind you, candles continue to burn before the Virgin's faded mantle, small flames trembling beneath a painted sky. You return to the street with the bell still lingering in your ears. The town seems darker now, but not empty. Farther ahead, past the market cross, lanterns swing beneath canvas awnings, and you catch a warmer colour moving through the square red sleeves, red caps, red cloth folded high on a merchant's table, glowing like banked coals in the night air. You follow the warm gleam of red toward the market square, where the night has not yet persuaded the town to sleep. The church bell fades behind you, replaced by the clatter of shutters, the soft flap of canvas awnings, and the low murmur of people doing their very best to finish business before darkness makes every coin look suspicious. The dog slips ahead through legs and baskets with the confidence of one who owns nothing and therefore fears no taxation. The square opens before you, paved in uneven stones that hold rain in their cracks. At its centre stands the market cross, wet and dark, with a little lantern hanging from an iron hook. Around it, merchants fold cloth, count pennies, pack scales, and argue in voices softened by fatigue. Here the colours sharpen in the torchlight. Brown and grey remain, of course, as faithful as mud and weather, but now red draws your eye again and again, a cap bright as rowan berries, a sleeve the colour of embers, a bolt of wool laid carefully across a trestle table like a strip of captured sunset. Red does not enter a medieval square quietly. It arrives with elbows. It belongs to blood and wine, roses and wounds, feast days and warnings, cardinals and carters, brides in some places and bold young fools in nearly all places. No one can quite agree whether red cloth makes a person braver, or merely makes everyone else assume bravery until events prove otherwise. Either way, you notice that the men wearing the brightest red seem very aware of their own sleeves. A cloth merchant stands beneath a striped awning, smoothing a length of red wool with both hands. He's a broad man with a trimmed beard, a fur-edged hood, and fingers stained faintly from years of handling dyed goods. Beside him, a smaller table holds cheaper pieces rusty russet, dull madder, and reddish-brown cloth sturdy enough for working folk who wish to look festive without alarming their purse. The finest red lies apart, folded with the care usually given to relics, sleeping babies, and pies cooling near dishonest relatives. You drift closer, pretending interest in nothing particular, which is how most people inspect expensive things they cannot afford. The cloth glows under the lantern. It is not a flat colour, not simple, not merely red. It holds shadows of cherry, brick, rose, and wine, all deepened by the wet air. The merchant lifts one corner and lets it fall back into place with a soft, heavy whisper. Good wool speaks when it moves. Poor wool merely complains. Nearby, a dyer's apprentice carries a bucket past the stall, and everyone gives him room. His apron is blotched with red, brown, and purple stains, and his hands look as though he has been wrestling berries in a chapel crypt. Dyers are useful, necessary, and often treated with caution, partly because their work smells dreadful, and partly because colours seem, to many minds, a little like controlled magic. Some swear that a dyer can ruin a rival's cloth with a curse muttered into the vat. Others say dyers need no curse at all because stale urine, old mordants, boiling water, and bad timing can ruin almost anything. Even now, it is hard to tell which explanation comforts people more. You pass a stall selling belts, caps, pins, and little ribbons. A young townsman in a red hood is bargaining for a narrow woven band to tie around his sleeve. His boots are polished, though the mud is already correcting that optimism. He glances often toward a group of women buying candles near the cross, and when one of them looks his way, he stands a little straighter. The dog sneezes beside you, perhaps at the smoke, perhaps at vanity. Medieval courtship, you begin to see, involves cloth, posture, and a willingness to ignore how cold one's ears are. Yet red is not only for flirtation and swagger. A butcher at the edge of the square wears a dark red cap, practical enough to hide stains and bold enough to identify his trade. A pilgrim has tied a faded red strip to his staff, saying softly to another traveller that it was blessed at a shrine beyond the hills. A woman selling apples keeps a red thread knotted around her wrist. Some swear such thread wards off the evil eye, especially when tied by someone with steady hands and no habit of gossip. This last requirement, you suspect, must make the charm difficult to obtain. At the far side of the square, beneath the overhang of the guild hall, 2 aldermen speak with the toll clerk you saw earlier. Without his gate table he looked diminished, but here among ledgers and market fees he seems to regain a little height. One alderman wears a gown lined in dark fur, his outer cloth a sober shade, but his sleeves are slashed just enough to reveal a red lining. It is a careful red, not shouting, not pleading, simply announcing that the wearer has coin, position, and perhaps access to a dinner that includes more than pottage. The other alderman wears a red belt clasped with a brass buckle polished bright. He rests his hand upon it as though steadying his authority. A crier's board stands nearby, marked with notices most people cannot read but many pretend to study. One parchment warns of market tolls, another concerns rules about selling bread by proper weight. A third, so someone murmurs, names those fined for wearing cloth above their station at a wedding feast. No one can quite agree whether such rules are meant to defend good order, protect trade, or simply remind everyone that even joy must know its place. In towns like this, colour may be pleasure, but it is also paperwork, and nothing dims romance like being fined for an ambitious sleeve. You rest beneath the awning of a spice cellar, letting the smells wrap around you: pepper, cloves, dried orange peel, honey cakes, damp canvas, and warm bodies gathered in the cold. Red appears here too, in little bowls of powdered dye, in strings of berries, in sealing wax, in the flushed noses of men who have warmed themselves too loyally with ale. A vendor offers spiced wine from a steaming pot, and you accept a small cup. It is sweet, hot, and sharp enough to convince your tongue that winter may yet be negotiated with. The dog looks up hopefully. You do not share. This is not cruelty. This is responsible tavern policy. Across the square, a woman in a faded red gown counts coins into the hand of the cloth merchant. Her gown has been turned and remade, the brighter inside brought outward after the first surface faded. Many garments live more than one life this way. Sleeves are replaced. Hems are let down. Old cloaks become children's tunics, then patches, then bindings, then rags for cleaning soot from pots. A fine red gown may outlast its first owner's pride and become, years later, a narrow trimming on a granddaughter's hood. Cloth remembers families in ways stone rarely bothers to. The merchant wraps her purchase in linen. She tucks it beneath her cloak, close to her ribs, and looks around as if the whole square has become suddenly full of thieves. Perhaps it has. Perhaps it always was. Red cloth invites eyes, and eyes sometimes have fingers attached. The night deepens. One by one, stalls close. The finest red is folded away into a chest with iron corners. The dyer's apprentice vanishes down a lane that smells faintly of smoke, vinegar, and secrets. The young man with the red hood follows the candle buyers at a respectful distance, pretending he had always intended to walk that way. The aldermen withdraw into the guild hall, carrying their sober gowns and hidden linings with them. You finish the last warmth of spiced wine and step from beneath the awning. The square behind you dims, but the memory of red lingers like embers under ash, bold, costly, useful, dangerous, holy, foolish, and alive. Ahead, a narrow lane slopes toward the outer road, where the town wall casts a long shadow and the air smells of wet leaves. Beyond the gate, the forest waits in darkness, and somewhere in that damp blackness, Green is sleeping under the winter earth. You leave the market square as its last lanterns shrink behind you, and the dog follows close enough that its paws make small wet sounds beside your boots. The lane narrows toward the outer gate, where a watchman lifts his lantern and squints at you as though travellers after dark are a personal insult. He does not ask many questions. Perhaps he has judged your cloak too muddy to conceal greatness and too plain to conceal danger. In a town like this, a person's clothing is often treated as a letter of introduction, and yours seems to say, mostly, tired. The gate opens just enough for you to slip through. Beyond it, the road bends toward the forest, pale with old ruts and silvered puddles. The town wall falls behind you, and the night air deepens. You smell wet leaves, cold bark, and the faint smoke of watchfires along the rampart. Above, clouds loosen across a dim moon. Beneath your feet, the mud changes from town filth to country mire, which is not cleaner, exactly, but does feel less personally involved. You walk slowly, letting the road pull you into the dark fringe of trees. In daylight, green would be everywhere here, moss on roots, ivy on stone, lichen on fallen branches, winter grass flattened beneath frost, and the hidden promise of spring folded into every hedge. At night, green becomes a memory, something sensed more than seen. Yet you remember the merchant's wife at the gate in her muted green mantle, and the way it glowed briefly against the cold. Green cloth carries the forest with it, even indoors. It suggests leaf, meadow, growth, youth, and sometimes trouble wearing a charming hat. No one can quite agree whether green is lucky or restless. Some swear it belongs to lovers, May games, and fresh beginnings. Others mutter that green is too changeable, too close to fairies, wild places, and promises made under trees. A village girl may wear green ribbons at a spring dance and be praised for prettiness, but a stranger in a green cloak arriving after sunset may earn a narrower look. It is unfair, of course. Many things are unfair in the Middle Ages, including dentistry, road quality, and the general behaviour of geese. The forest road dips between hedges. Thorn branches scratch softly against your cloak. The dog pauses to sniff a stone cross half sunk at the roadside, then sneezes and trots on. Someone has tied scraps of cloth to a nearby hawthorn brown, blue, grey, and one faded strip that may once have been green. Such trees often gather wishes, aches, vows, and bargains. Some people tie rags there after touching them to a sore limb, hoping the illness will fade as the cloth decays. Others leave ribbons for saints, wells, or older powers whose names the priest would prefer not to hear mentioned near supper. Even now, it is hard to tell whether this is medicine, prayer, memory, or simply the human habit of fastening hope to whatever stands still long enough. You touch the lowest branch without taking anything. The cloth scraps stir in the wind like tiny worn-out flags. A green ribbon hangs near the trunk, darker where rain has soaked it, and for a moment it looks almost alive. You think of all the green garments that must have passed through hands before coming to rest in wardrobes, market stalls, marriage chests, and chapel offerings. Green dye may come from many plants, but keeping it bright is another matter. Colours shift, they fade, yellow, sour, or sink into brown. A good green can be delicate, unstable, and expensive enough to make its wearer careful around rain. smoke, and careless friends with cups of ale. Farther along, the road meets a clearing where a few travellers have gathered around a small fire. A cart stands beside them, one wheel propped on a stone, its rim cracked from the day's rough going. The broken cart wheel leans at an angle, looking ashamed of itself. A young man in a green hood sits on a log, turning a stick in the fire. Beside him, two women share coarse bread from a cloth bundle, and an older pilgrim warms his hands beneath sleeves the colour of wet ash. Their horse stands nearby, steaming gently in the cold, wrapped in an old blanket that has seen more winters than many nights he battles. You approach with care, and the travellers make room without much ceremony. On the road, warmth is a language almost everyone understands. You settle near the fire, holding your hands out until the ache in your fingers loosens. The dog receives a crust from one of the women, and immediately decides she's a person of rare moral excellence. The young man in green is perhaps a messenger, perhaps a servant, perhaps only someone who likes being noticed. His hood is brighter inside the folds, where the sun and weather have not reached. He wears it with a small feather tucked near the side, not grand enough for court, but confident enough for a road full of strangers. One of the women teases him softly that green is the colour of men who promise to return by midsummer and are found by autumn at another fair. He smiles, though not too loudly. In the firelight, everyone is gentler than they might be at noon. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about green lovers. Some say green is faithful because it returns each spring. Some say it is faithless because leaves fall, grass withers, and young hearts wander faster than market gossip. The older pilgrim, who has the calm face of a man who has slept in many barns and trusted very few sausages, says only that a cloak's colour matters less than whether it keeps the rain out. This is difficult wisdom to argue with. The fire pops. Sparks drift upward and vanish. Someone passes a wooden cup of thin ale. It tastes smoky, sour, and deeply medieval, which is to say it makes no promises it cannot keep. You drink a little and feel warmth settle behind your ribs. The young man in green speaks of a manor ahead, where travellers may sometimes find shelter if the steward is in a generous mood and the hounds are not. He points down the road, through the trees, where darkness gathers thickly between the trunks. Around the clearing, the forest holds its breath. You hear the far cry of an owl, the rustle of something small under leaves, the creak of the broken cart wheel as the wind nudges it. One of the women has green stitching around her sleeve, tiny vines worked in wool thread. She says her grandmother believed such stitching helped keep a person from getting lost, because vines always know how to cling. Another traveller says his aunt believed the opposite. The vine patterns might bind a person to bad roads. No one resolves the matter. The fire is warm, and certainty would only wake everyone up. You look at the green hood, the green ribbon on the thorn tree, the green embroidery curling at the woman's wrist. In the town, colours seem to stand in neat ranks, brown for work, blue for devotion, red for market pride and peril. Here beyond the wall, green refuses neatness. It belongs to the fields that feed the poor, the forests that hide outlaws, the herbs that heal, the moss on forgotten stones, the young who hope too quickly, and the old stories that survive by never quite explaining themselves. The travellers begin to settle. The women wrap their cloaks close. The pilgrim tucks his badge beneath his collar. The young man lowers his green hood against the cold and leans back against the cart, which creaks again, as if offended by rest. You rise reluctantly, for the road must be followed a little farther before sleep. The dog stands too, after confirming that no additional crusts are forthcoming. You leave the clearing with the smell of smoke in your hair, and the small warmth of the fire fading at your back. Ahead, through the bare trees, a darker shape lifts against the sky, the roofline of a manor hall beyond the fields. A horned moon glints on wet branches, and the forest green disappears into black, waiting for morning to remember itself. You leave the last fringe of forest behind and cross a field path silvered with frost, your boots pressing the stiff ground while the manor rises ahead in the dark like a ship made of timber and stone. The dog keeps close at your heel now, less bold than before, as if even it understands that a manor yard is a place where rank has teeth. A low wall marks the boundary. Beyond it stand sheds, a bakehouse, a byre, and the long hall itself, its narrow windows spilling out strips of firelight that tremble in the wind. Smoke drifts from the roof vent and hangs beneath the night like a wool blanket that has forgotten how to dry. At the gate, a servant with a lantern looks you over from hood to boots. He sees the mud, the road weariness, the plain cloak, the dog, and whatever small respectability you still possess after a day spent in rain, market smoke, and country mire. He speaks briefly with a porter, then jerks his head toward the side entrance used by visitors who are tolerated rather than expected. This, too, is a language of cloth and doors. The grander the welcome, the larger the doorway. You are not given the largest doorway. Still, shelter is shelter, and you duck inside with gratitude before the cold can revise the arrangement. The manor hall greets you with warmth, smoke, and a great many opinions. Rushes cover the floor, though not evenly, and their scent is mixed with spilled ale, damp boots, and the sweeter smell of herbs trodden underfoot. A central hearth glows beneath the open louvre in the roof, sending smoke upward in a noble effort that only partly succeeds. The soot-black rafters disappear into shadow. Along the walls hang shields, antlers, iron hooks, and a tapestry whose faded hunting scene suggests that deer once had the good manners to stand still for embroidery. You remain near the lower end of the hall, where benches are rougher and the company humbler. Even here, however, the difference between one person and another announces itself in cloth. Servants move quickly in dark tunics and practical aprons, their sleeves plain, their hems worn, their belts fitted with keys, knives, or small pouches. A steward passes by in a long gown of sober dark wool, almost black in the firelight, the collar trimmed with fur so soft and close that it seems to hum with authority. Near the dais at the far end, the Lord's household gathers in richer darkness deep gowns, heavy mantles, black hoods lined with fur, and sleeves that swallow candlelight rather than reflect it. Black here is not the black of emptiness. It is the black of cost, care, and control. A truly deep black cloth is difficult to dye and harder to maintain. It takes good wool, good money, and a household able to keep smoke, sun, and rough work from spoiling it too quickly. No one can quite agree whether black is favoured because it suggests dignity or because it allows powerful people to look stern without raising their voices. From where you stand, both seem possible. A maid brings trenchers of coarse bread to the lower tables. Her kirtle is brown under a dark surcoat, and her cuffs are rubbed shiny with use. Behind her comes a kitchen boy carrying a pot of pottage, trying very hard to look older than he is, and nearly walking into a hound asleep by the hearth. The hound opens one eye, judges him, and goes back to sleep. This seems wise. The pottage smells of peas, leeks, onions, and a little salt pork. And suddenly the entire hall becomes a chapel dedicated to supper. You are given a place near the end bench, where lesser guests, messengers, and useful nobodies take their meals. The dog curls beneath the board after securing a crust from a scullion who pretends not to notice. Across from you sits a man with a patched cloak and a face reddened by the road. He eats with the solemn concentration of someone who knows supper may not improve if ignored. Beside him, a laundress warms her hands around a wooden cup and watches the higher tables with a look that contains equal parts boredom and anthropology. At the dais, the lord's family and favoured retainers eat from finer trenchers, and their clothing turns the firelight rich and low. One woman wears a gown so dark it seems black until the flames catch a hidden sheen of blue. Her mantle is lined with squirrel fur, pale at the edge. A man beside her has a fur collar broad enough to suggest either wealth or an especially successful argument with a woodland creature. Their garments do not merely keep them warm, they establish distance. Fur says you do not carry water. Deep black says you do not muck stalls. Fine wool says your hands give orders more often than they receive them. The household moves according to rules almost too old to notice. Servants do not sit until permitted. Dishes travel upward before they come down. Bread is cut in measures. Ale poured in sequence. Hands washed from basin to basin according to status. A page brings a ewer and towel to the high table first, while the lower benches make do with patience. Some swear that the order of serving reflects the order of heaven itself, with lords nearest grace and kitchen boys nearest the turnip barrel. Others suspect heaven is less interested in seating charts than manor stewards are. The steward passes again, fur collar close to his jaw, iron keys at his girdle clicking faintly as he walks. He has the air of a man who could inventory your soul and find it short on candles. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such men are born severe or simply stitched into severity by dark cloth and responsibility. He pauses to correct the position of a serving lad, lowers his gaze at a maid whose coif has slipped, then moves on without hurry. In a manor hall, small mistakes do not erupt into drama. They are absorbed into the structure like smoke into rafters. You eat your pottage slowly. The bread is coarse but warm. The ale is thin but welcome. Nearby, two servants whisper while plucking a roasted fowl for tomorrow's pie. One murmurs that wearing black thread in the hem can ward off envy, since dark edges confuse malicious eyes. The other says her aunt claims the opposite, that black near the feet invites sorrow to follow a person home. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and perhaps that is for the best. Certainty is a restless thing. Superstition, when kept slightly vague, sits much more quietly beside the fire. As the meal winds down, beeswax candles are lit near the dais while tallow dips smoke along the walls below. The difference in candlelight is as eloquent as the difference in cloth. At the high table the flames burn clean and honey-sweet. At the lower end they sputter and lean, leaving a smell like singed wool and old patience. Still, the whole hall grows softer in the late hour. Voices fall. A woman gathers wool blankets for the benches where lesser guests may sleep. A groom enters briefly with news from the yard, trailing cold air and the smell of hay. Somewhere beyond the wall, you hear a horse stamp and a chain rattle. You lean back and watch the dark garments move through the smoky glow, fur catching light at collar and cuff. Black wool folding around knees and shoulders like controlled shadows. Here, more clearly than anywhere yet, colour arranges the world. Not loud colour this time, not red boasting in the market or blue glowing near the altar, but dark colour, disciplined and deliberate, holding rank in place as firmly as oak beams hold the roof above you. At last, a servant gestures for you to follow toward a side chamber where travellers may sleep on pallets, laid with wool blankets and a little damp hay. You rise quietly, the dog stretching beneath the bench before padding after you. As you leave the hall, the steward's keys click once more behind you, and from somewhere deeper in the manor, where the chapel lamp burns low and cold hands seek comfort, you catch the pale flash of linen in the candlelight. You follow the pale flash of linen through the side passage, where the manor's warmth thins and the air turns cool enough to make your breath return in soft ghosts. The walls are close here, timber and plaster smelling faintly of damp, smoke, and stored apples. A servant carries a candle before you, cupping the flame with one hand. Its light slides along iron hinges, rough beams, and a hanging bundle of dried herbs tied with red thread, rosemary, sage, and rue sway above the doorway. Placed there, someone whispers, to sweeten the air and trouble whatever unseen things may prefer a darker welcome. The sleeping chamber offered to travellers is humble, but after the road it feels almost tender. Pallets lie along the wall, stuffed with straw that rustles beneath wool blankets. A narrow shutter does its best against the wind and fails in several educational places. The dog circles once, twice, 3 times, then chooses the least draughty corner with the instincts of a seasoned pilgrim, and collapses as if it has personally negotiated the treaty between night and exhaustion. You might settle there at once, but a murmur from farther down the passage draws you onward. A maid hurries past with a basin of warm water, and another follows carrying a bundle of white linen folded over her arm. The cloth seems to glow in the candlelight, clean and pale against the smoky passage. After the dark furs of the hall and the mud browns of the road, white appears almost startling, not grand like purple, not bold like red, but intimate. White belongs to skin, sleep, wounds, washing, birth, burial, prayer, and all the fragile places where the body admits it needs help. You move quietly toward a small chamber near the manor chapel. The door is half open. Inside, an older woman lies propped beneath a wool blanket, her face damp with fever, while 2 servants and a monk from the nearby abbey tend her. A beeswax candle burns beside a little painted image of St. Margaret, and beneath it rests a small reliquary wrapped in linen. No one can quite agree whether the relic inside is truly from a saint's garment, a saint's cousin's garment, or merely something old enough to have become persuasive. In the Middle Ages, age itself often does half the preaching. The monk's sleeves are pushed back. His fingers are ink-stained, though tonight they hold no quill. He dips a strip of clean linen into warmed water scented with herbs, then lays it across the woman's brow. The cloth darkens as it touches her skin. Another strip is folded near her wrist. A small bowl of crushed betony and honey waits on a stool, beside a cup of thin ale and charm written on parchment in a careful hand. Some swear that words, herbs, relics, and linen must work together, like 4 nervous servants carrying one heavy chest. Others say one of them is bound to help eventually, and the trick is not knowing which. You stand just outside the room, not wishing to intrude, yet the scene draws your gaze. White linen is precious in a different way from dyed wool. It must be grown from flax, retted, broken, scutched, hackled, spun, woven, washed, bleached, cut, hemmed, and guarded against dirt with nearly comic seriousness in a world made mostly of dirt. A fine white cloth is not merely clean. It is labour made visible. It is sunlight caught in thread, beaten on stones, stretched on grass, and prayed over by women whose backs remember every hour. A servant lifts a folded sheet and shakes it once. The linen sighs open, releasing the faint smell of lavender and cold air. She tucks it beneath the sick woman's chin with a tenderness that makes the whole room seem quieter. At the bedside, a little leather pouch hangs from the bedpost. It holds, the maid murmurs, fennel seeds, a pinch of salt, and a scrap of blessed cloth from a shrine. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such pouches keep away fever, bad dreams, or simply the fear that comes when night stretches too long. You cannot blame anyone for wanting something tied close when the dark leans in. The monk begins a soft prayer. His voice is low, worn smooth by repetition, and the words settle over the chamber like another blanket. The candle flame bows, straightens, bows again. The sick woman stirs, and one of the servants touches her shoulder through the linen, as if the cloth makes the gesture safer, gentler, almost holy. In a corner, a basin of water reflects the flame. Beside it lies a small knife used to trim bandages, a spool of thread, and a bundle of leeches in a glazed pot covered with cloth. The pot shifts faintly. You decide, with great spiritual clarity, not to investigate. Medieval remedies gather strange companions. A fever may be met with cooling cloths, prayers to saints, herbal draughts, charms written and worn near the heart, bloodletting, fasting, warming, washing, or advice from an aunt who claims authority because she once survived something similar. Even now, it is hard to tell whether confidence cures more than caution. Yet in this chamber, beneath the clean linen and the candle, the care itself seems to matter. Hands move slowly. Voices remain soft. Cloth is warmed before it touches skin. A cup is held carefully to cracked lips. The world may be harsh, but it is not without tenderness. You think back to the brown garments by poor hearths, the blue cloth beneath the church bell, the red in the market square, the green ribbon on the hawthorn, the black fur in the manor hall. White is quieter than all of them, but it reaches deeper. It lies under armour, under gowns, under work tunics. It wraps the newly washed and the newly ill. It covers altar tables and kitchen bread. It becomes coifs, shifts, bandages, shrouds, napkins, towels, and little offerings left beside saints whose patience must be enormous. At last, the monk rises and covers the reliquary again. The servants settle the sick woman more comfortably. One folds the unused linen with care, smoothing each corner before setting it in a chest. Clean cloth must not be wasted. Holiness, too, apparently benefits from good housekeeping. You step back as the door closes. The passage feels darker after that white room, and the candle in the servant's hand burns lower, its wax softened at the rim. You return toward the traveller's chamber, where the dog opens one eye to confirm that you have not brought food, then returns to sleep with admirable speed. You lie down on the straw pallet and draw the wool blanket close, still carrying the image of a linen bright in candlelight, of herbs hanging above the door, of careful hands tending what they cannot fully understand. Beyond the shutter, the night wind moves over the manor roofs. Somewhere nearby, the chapel lamp burns before its uncertain relic. Somewhere deeper in the house, iron keys click once and fall silent. You close your eyes, and in the dimness behind them, pale cloth drifts like a small moon over troubled sleep. You wake before dawn to the sound of a shutter tapping softly in the wind, as if some polite ghost has come to ask whether the household is accepting visitors. The traveller's chamber lies in bluish darkness. Straw rustles beneath you. Someone snores in a corner with the steady rhythm of a small sawmill. The dog is still curled near the wall, nose tucked beneath its tail, having achieved a peace that saints and kings might envy. For a few breaths, you do not move. You listen to the manor settling around you, a coal shifting in a distant hearth, a horse stamping in the yard, water dripping from eaves into a barrel, the faint murmur of women already awake in the service rooms. The night's images return slowly, black fur by the high table, white linen in the sick room, the uncertain relic wrapped in pale cloth, the monk's ink-stained hands. You draw your cloak tighter and sit up, feeling the chill press through your sleeves. A servant opens the door and gestures for you to rise. Morning is not yet morning, but in a medieval household, the day begins when labour says so, not when comfort agrees. You follow him into the passage, where a tallow dip smokes in a wool bracket. The air tastes of cold ashes and damp wool. The dog pads after you, hopeful that dawn has improved the world's supply of crusts. Instead of leading you back to the hall, the servant brings you along a narrower corridor near the private chambers. Here the floorboards creak less. The walls are better plastered. A small chest stands beneath a hanging cloth, and beside it a maid kneels with a ring of iron keys. She looks up sharply as you pass, then lowers her eyes. The keys at her belt are smaller than the steward's, but they shine with equal seriousness. Keys mean trust. Keys mean danger. Keys mean someone has things worth locking away. Beyond an open door, you glimpse a chamber warmer than the passage, lit by 2 beeswax candles and a brazier of coals. A woman of the household sits near a carved chest while a maid folds garments on a bench. The cloths are not laid out carelessly. Each piece seems to have its own breath, its own guarded importance. There is dark wool, soft fur, a veil of fine linen, and then, half-shadowed beneath a protective wrapping, a folded length of purple. You stop before you mean to. The colour is not loud in the candlelight. It does not blaze like red in the market or shimmer like blue beneath the Virgin's mantle. It waits, it deepens, it seems to hold the dimness inside itself and turn it noble. Purple is a colour that makes even silence stand straighter. The maid notices your gaze and draws the wrapping farther over it. The woman by the chest does not look offended, only faintly amused, as though she knows that everyone looks when purple appears, even people pretending to study the furniture. No one can quite agree whether purple is prized because of emperors, bishops, ancient stories, rare dyes, or because it is simply difficult enough to obtain that people assume heaven must be involved. In truth, difficulty is one of the oldest tailors of status. You move on, but slowly, because the door remains open and the servant ahead has paused to speak with another household worker. Inside the chamber, the woman lifts a small purse from the chest and checks its clasp. The maid folds the purple cloth again, touching only the edges. It may be part of a gown, a lining, a narrow trimming, or a precious gift meant to be shown only on feast days. Even a little purple can change a garment's voice. A brown sleeve says work, a blue hood says devotion. A red cap says look at me before I do something regrettable. Purple says remember who is allowed to stand near the centre of the room. In many places, laws or customs try to decide who may wear what, though the rules shift like smoke from one lordship to another. A prosperous merchant may own cloth finer than a minor noble can afford, and this makes the world uncomfortable for those who prefer rank to remain tidy. Some swear that such rules protect the natural order. Others whisper that they protect noble vanity from being startled in public. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the fines are usually real. And so are the glances. The servant clears his throat, and you realize you've been lingering like a moth near forbidden candlelight. You follow him onward into a small antechamber where breakfast is being set for lesser guests. Coarse bread, cheese, a bowl of stewed apples, and ale thin enough to see regret through it, yet your mind remains behind, with the chest and the purple fold. A monk from the previous night sits at the end of the board, his hands wrapped around a wooden cup. Ink stains still mark his fingers. He nods to you with the tired kindness of a man who has prayed through too many hours. Beside him rests a parcel wrapped in grey cloth and tied with cord. He sees you glance at it and says nothing, which somehow makes it more interesting. The dog slips beneath the bench and places its chin upon your boot, as if to remind you that mysteries are less nourishing than cheese. As you eat, the monk speaks quietly with the steward, who's appeared with his keyring and fur collar, looking as though dawn itself requires supervision. They mention a journey to the abbey, a sealed letter, and cloth to be delivered for vestments. You catch only fragments. Purple, gold thread, bishop's visit, locked coffer, accounts. The words move together like pieces in a board game where every piece expects to be obeyed. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the purple cloth you glimpsed is meant for worldly display or sacred ceremony, perhaps both. In this world, power and faith often share a wardrobe, though they may argue over the mirror, a bishop's vestment, a noblewoman's mantle, a royal gift, a rich altar hanging all may draw from the same hunger for colour that seems larger than comfort. Purple makes the invisible visible: authority, distance, favour, wealth, blessing, ambition. It is not only worn, it is performed. After the small meal, the steward allows you to walk in the yard while arrangements are made. The sky has lightened to a flat pearl grey. Frost clings to the edges of barrels and cartwheels. A groom leads a horse from the stable, its blanket patched but clean. Near the bakehouse, servants carry baskets of coarse loaves. Steam rises from the kitchen roof, warm and fragrant with bread. The dog receives a heel from the same generous scullion as before, and reaffirms its belief in human goodness. By the well, two maids whisper while drawing water. One says that purple cloth should never be left open beneath a waning moon, or its richness may fade with the light. The other says that is nonsense, and fading is caused by poor dye, careless washing, and husbands who hang things too near smoke. Both views seem possible, though the second carries the sturdy confidence of experience. Some swear that rare colours must be protected from envy as much as rain. A fine garment may be stored with herbs, wrapped in linen, locked in oak, and brought out only for days when the household wishes the world to remember its place. You look toward the upper windows, where the private chamber lies hidden again. There's no sign of the purple now, only shutters, stone, and a thin thread of smoke from a chimney. Yet the memory of that folded cloth changes how you see the manor. Its walls are not only walls, they are a chest around rank. Its doors do not merely keep out cold, they decide who may witness splendour. Its keys do not only guard coins, they guard colours. Soon the steward emerges, carrying a sealed packet. Behind him, the monk's grey-wrapped parcel is brought out and placed in a covered basket. You are told the road to the abbey runs east through the low fields, past a mill, a shrine, and a village where the bridge may or may not still be standing. This is offered as useful information, though it does have the flavour of a threat. You set your cloak around your shoulders. The dog, having apparently chosen pilgrimage as its profession, joins you without invitation. As you leave the manor yard, you glance back once at the high windows. Behind locked doors, purple sleeps again in its folds, rare and watchful, waiting for feast, ceremony, bargain, or prayer. Ahead, The road grows pale under the waking sky, and somewhere beyond the fields, chapel candles are being lit beside gold thread that will catch the morning like fire. You take the east road beneath a sky the colour of washed linen, with frost whitening the grass and the manor shrinking behind you into smoke, timber, and locked memories. The dog trots beside your boots as if it has been appointed guardian of the journey by some authority that neglected to inform you. Ahead, the monk walks with his grey-wrapped parcel tucked close beneath one arm, his cloak drawn around him, his ink-stained fingers hidden from the cold. The steward's sealed packet rests inside the monk's satchel, and though it is only parchment, wax, and words, it seems to weigh as heavily as a small chest of coins. The fields lie quiet. Ridges of ploughed earth hold thin crusts of ice. Crows stand in the furrows like black punctuation marks in a sermon about winter. You pass a mill where the wheel turns slowly in the dark water, complaining with each rotation, and a miller's boy sweeps grain dust from the threshold with a broom of twigs. His tunic is plain brown, his cap grey, but around his wrist he has tied a little yellow thread. Some swear yellow protects against jaundice, spite, and sour milk. Others say children tie on any thread they can find and let grown people invent reasons afterward. No one can quite agree, which is often how a custom manages to live so long. By mid-morning the abbey appears beyond a line of bare trees. Its church tower rises low and square, not proud like a castle keep, but steady, with the calm patience of stone that expects to outlast every argument. Smoke lifts from the bakehouse. A bell rings from the cloister, thinner than the town bell, yet clearer, as if the sound has been washed before being sent into the air. You cross a small bridge slick with frost and enter beneath an arched gate where a lay brother greets the monk with a nod. He looks at you, then at the dog, then at the monk. The monk sighs in the tiny way of a man who has learned that dogs, like weather and bishops, arrive when they choose. Inside the abbey yard, everything seems measured by bells. Men carry wood in silence. A novice hurries with a basket of rushes. Another shakes out a wool blanket over a rail, releasing dust that sparkles in the pale light. Near the guest house door, herbs hang drying in bunches: sage, hyssop, lavender, rue, and rosemary, their scents mingling with warm bread, damp stone, and the faint animal smell of wool. The monk leads you not to the hall, but toward a workroom near the chapel, where a narrow window admits the grey morning. There, by candlelight and window light together, women and lay brothers sit over cloth stretched on frames. Gold thread lies in small coils on a linen cloth, guarded more carefully than supper and perhaps with better reason. It gleams even in the dull light, not like ordinary yellow, not like straw or butter or candle flame, but like something that remembers the sun from a great distance. You pause at the threshold, and for the second time that morning, cloth makes you forget your manners. An older embroiderer lifts her eyes and smiles as if she has seen this happen before. The monk sets down his parcel and unwraps it carefully. Inside lies a folded piece of dark fabric, perhaps blue, perhaps purple, perhaps some costly shade that changes its mind depending on the candle. The embroiderers lean closer. One touches it with the back of her finger, not the palm, as if greeting a noble guest who dislikes familiarity. Gold thread is not merely thread. Often it's a fine strip of gilded metal wound around a silk or linen core, delicate, stubborn, and entirely too expensive to waste on careless stitches. It catches on rough skin, it kinks, it sulks, it breaks at moments chosen by the devil, According to one young embroiderer who immediately crosses herself after saying so, some swear that gold thread must be worked in calm weather, because thunder can make it misbehave. Others say the true danger is a tired hand and poor light. Even now, it is hard to tell whether craft or superstition is the stricter master. You step inside and stand near the wall, grateful for the warmth of a brazier glowing in the corner. The dog is firmly denied entrance and sits just outside the door, looking betrayed enough to be painted in a manuscript margin. A novice gives it a crust anyway, proving that abbeys are not without mercy. The workroom is quiet except for the whisper of thread, the creak of frames, and the soft instructions of the older woman. The cloth they prepare is meant for chapel vestments, perhaps for a coming bishop's visit, perhaps for a feast day when the altar will shine and every candle will seem to have dressed better than the villagers. Gold is used sparingly, but its meaning spreads beyond its measure. A narrow band at a hem can turn cloth toward holiness. A cross worked on a chasuble can make the priest seem, in candlelight, to carry heaven on his shoulders. A border of gold around a saint's robe can tell even the tired, hungry, and illiterate that this figure belongs to the bright side of eternity. You watch as the embroiderer lays the gold thread upon the surface of the cloth and fastens it down with tiny stitches of silk. She does not pull the gold through the fabric again and again, for that would waste and weaken it. Instead, she couches it in place, securing brilliance with small, patient acts almost too humble to see. This pleases you in a sleepy way. Even splendor, it turns out, depends on quiet labor. On a nearby table rests a wooden box lined with cloth. Inside are needles, scraps, little bundles of colored silk, beeswax for smoothing thread, a small pair of shears, and a parchment pattern pricked with holes. A novice dusts charcoal through the pattern to mark a design on fabric, leaving faint dotted lines. He does it with the serious expression of someone entrusted with a task that could either glorify God or irritate an abbess, and one suspects he fears the abbess more immediately. The older embroiderer speaks of colours as if naming members of a household. Gold for glory, white for purity, red for sacrifice and feast, blue for the Virgin, green for living hope, black for mourning, dignity, or the stern days when joy is asked to sit quietly, purple, when available, for authority and solemn grandeur. No one can quite agree whether gold thread draws the eye upward toward holy things or downward toward the purse that paid for it. The truth, you suspect, is that human beings often manage both at once. A young woman bends close over a border of vine leaves, her hair tucked beneath a linen coif. Her fingertips are rough, but her stitches are fine enough to make the gold seem to float. She says her grandmother believed that a loose thread on a vestment could snag a prayer before it reached heaven. The older embroiderer replies that loose threads mostly snag sleeves, but heaven has endured worse. The room accepts this as wisdom. Gentle laughter moves through the workers, soft as wool being folded. Beyond the window, the abbey bell rings again, calling some brothers to prayer and others to work that looks very much like prayer if watched from the right angle. A lay brother carries in a fresh beeswax candle, and the flame brightens the gold until it glows against the dark cloth. For one breath, the whole room seems warmer, not richer, exactly. Richness is too noisy a word. It seems more gathered, as if every small labour of sheep, flax, dye, mine, merchant, ship, road, hand, needle, and candle has arrived here to rest in one shining line. You think of the poor woman mending brown wool at her hearth, of the seamstress kneeling with blue cloth in church, of red folded beneath market canvas, green ribbons trembling on hawthorn, black fur at the manor high table, white linen laid on a fevered brow, and purple sleeping behind locks. Here, gold does not erase those colours, it binds them to ceremony. It makes cloth speak to those standing far at the back, those who cannot read the Latin, those who only know that when the priest turns and the candlelight catches the vestment, something bright has entered the room. The monk collects the steward's packet and leaves it with the abbey cellarer, who counts seals and nods over accounts with a face as dry as old parchment. The embroiderers return to their careful shining. You remain a little longer, letting the warmth settle into your hands. The dog sighs from the threshold. The brazier clicks. Gold thread lies across dark cloth like a path of sunlight too narrow to walk, but wide enough for the eye to follow. At last, the older embroiderer covers the work with linen to keep away dust, envy, and possibly novices with elbows. You step back into the abbey yard, where the day has brightened, and the road beyond the gate waits under a low winter sky. The bell's note fades above you, near the chapel door. A grey-cloaked pilgrim adjusts a badge on his hat and looks eastward, toward the road of shrines, mud, hunger, hope, and long walking. You leave the abbey yard in the company of the grey-cloaked pilgrim, whose hat is pinned with small badges that click faintly when he walks. One is shaped like a scallop shell, another shows a saint with arms lifted in blessing, though the details are worn smooth by weather and many hopeful fingers. A third may be a shrine token, a market trinket, or proof that someone once reached a holy place and returned with just enough money left to buy metal proof of the trouble. No one can quite agree whether pilgrim badges protect the traveller, remember the journey, or simply tell innkeepers whom to overcharge. On the road, all three may be true. The sky hangs low and colourless, pressing the fields into silence. Frost has softened into wetness, and the path east of the abbey becomes a long ribbon of mud, pale stones, and old hoofprints filled with cloudy water. Grey suits this road. It belongs to the clouds, the ash in wayside fires, the wool of tired sheep, the smoke from cottage roofs, and the faces of travellers who have slept badly on straw and called it lodging. You pull your cloak close and fall into the slow rhythm of walking, while the dog trots ahead, sniffing each rut as if reading a private chronicle of breakfast possibilities. The pilgrim's cloak is coarse grey wool, cut wide enough to wrap around his body when he sleeps under hedges or in church porches. It is not beautiful, unless beauty can be measured by usefulness, in which case it may be one of the finest garments on earth. Rain beads on it, then sinks in. Burrs cling to the hem. A darker patch covers one shoulder where the cloth has worn thin beneath the strap of his satchel. His shoes are thick, cracked, and tied with leather thongs. Around his neck hangs a little pouch that contains, he tells you, dried sage, a coin bent before a shrine, and a scrap of cloth touched to a saint's tomb. Some swear that a bent coin keeps the promise of a prayer better than a straight one. Others say people bend coins because they cannot bear to part with full value unless heaven seems to notice. You pass a roadside shrine beneath a bare elder tree. Its wooden image is faded by rain, the saint's face reduced to 2 dark eyes and a patient mouth. Travellers have left offerings in a shallow niche: a feather, a candle stub, 3 pebbles, a broken buckle, and strips of cloth tied to the branches overhead. Grey rags flutter there among blue, brown, and one stubborn red thread. The pilgrim pauses, touches his badge, and bows his head. You stand beside him, listening to the wind move through the scraps like whispered laundry. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these roadside gestures are acts of faith, habit, fear, or gratitude for having survived the last hill without losing a shoe. The Middle Ages rarely separate such things neatly. A person may pray to a saint, avoid stepping on the wrong route, carry an herb against fever, and complain about the price of ale all within the same mile. This is not confusion, this is efficiency. By noon, the road fills with others. 2 women walk with staffs, their gowns tucked high enough to keep the hems from the worst mud. A peddler follows with a pack of needles, ribbons, combs, and small mirrors polished from metal. A thin man with a grey hood leads a donkey bearing baskets of smoked fish, and the smell travels ahead of him like an announcement no one requested. Everyone wears some shade of weather: grey cloaks, grey caps, grey hose, grey faces beneath the cold. Bright colours appear only in fragments: a blue edge at a sleeve, a red cord at a purse, a green ribbon half hidden beneath a mantle. On the road, humility is partly spiritual and partly enforced by rain. You share a heel of coarse bread near a ditch where winter grass lies flat and shining. The pilgrim breaks his piece carefully, scattering crumbs for the dog with the seriousness of a man making peace with all creation. In return, the dog rests its chin on his knee and looks at him as though he has discovered theology. The peddler offers a little salt from a horn box, and for a few quiet moments the roadside becomes a table. There are no trenchers, no clean cloth, no beeswax candles, only bread, smoked fish, cold fingers, and the soft relief of sitting down. The pilgrim speaks of roads. He has taken one through a forest where bells could be heard but no abbey seen, one over a moor where lights appeared at dusk and led travellers into bogs, one past a manor where the steward counted guests as if each spoonful of pottage had been stolen from his personal future. You think of the steward's fur collar and clicking keys, and the memory warms you almost as much as the bread. Some swear that grey cloaks help pilgrims pass unseen by thieves, tax men, and troublesome spirits. Others say grey simply shows dirt less clearly, which is a blessing so practical it ought to be canonized. As the afternoon thins, the road climbs toward a low ridge. From there you see the land spread out in winter colours: brown fields, silver streams, black hedges, white smoke, grey sky. A village lies ahead, gathered around a church tower and a pond rimmed with reeds. The abbey bell is too far behind you now, but another bell rings from the village, faint and uneven, calling the hour across wet fields. The sound seems to gather every traveller into the same measure: lord, monk, labourer, widow. Pilgrim, dog with questionable manners, all must move beneath the same sky and toward the same evening. You descend carefully, for the mud here is slick enough to make dignity an ambitious project. The peddler slips once, recovers, and bows to the road as if the fall were intentional. No one laughs loudly. On pilgrimage, mercy often begins with pretending not to have seen. The dog, naturally, bounds through the worst of it and emerges looking pleased with the engineering of its own paws. At the village edge, a woman sells hot peas pottage from a pot near a sheltering wall. Steam rises in fragrant clouds, carrying the smell of onions, herbs, and wood smoke. You buy a small bowl with a worn coin and eat slowly while rain begins again, tapping on your hood. The pilgrim stands beside you, his grey cloak darkening at the shoulders. His badges glimmer dully. Little memories of shrines and roads and promises half kept. Grey, you begin to understand, is not emptiness. It is the colour of endurance without display. It belongs to those who travel between places of brightness, from golden altar to smoky inn, from blue shrine to brown field, from locked purple chambers to open roads where no one cares what you once owned if your feet are blistered enough. Grey allows the weary to move quietly through a world too ready to judge by colour. It is humility, yes, but also camouflage, patience, and weather made wearable. As evening gathers, the travellers drift toward a low inn near the village green. Its sign creaks above the door, painted with a pilgrim staff and a cup, promising both holiness and ale in proportions yet to be determined. You step inside with the others, bringing rain, mud, and road cold with you. Rushes cover the floor. A fire burns low beneath soot-black rafters. In the smoky room, cloaks are hung on pegs, grey beside grey, until the wall looks like a row of tired clouds resting before night. You settle near the hearth, the dog beneath your bench, the pilgrim beside you with his badges dim in the firelight. Outside, rain taps the shutters, and the road waits in darkness. Inside, among bowls of pottage and murmured prayers, grey cloaks steam gently, releasing the scent of wool, weather, and long hope. You wake in the inn before sunrise to the small sounds of travellers remembering their bodies. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Someone fumbles for a boot beneath a bench. The fire has sunk to red eyes under ash, and the rushes on the floor smell of damp wool, spilled ale, old smoke, and whatever the dog found interesting enough to roll near during the night. You decide not to identify it. Medieval wisdom often begins with knowing which mysteries to leave covered. The grey-cloaked pilgrim sits beside you, tightening the strap of his satchel with fingers stiff from cold. His badges click softly, dull little notes in the dim room. Around the hearth, other travellers stir the peddler with his pack of ribbons and needles, the women with walking staffs, the smoked fish man whose baskets continue to announce themselves with heroic commitment. Outside, rain has stopped, but the morning is wet and pale, and the village bell rings as though it too would rather remain in bed. You step into the yard, where mist lies over the pond and chickens scratch near the stable door. The dog trots out after you, shakes itself thoroughly, and thereby blesses your hose with a fine spray of yesterday's road. Across the lane, villagers are already moving toward a fair setup beyond the churchyard, where poles, ropes, and canvas awnings lean under the weight of rainwater. It is not a grand fair, not the sort sung about by minstrels who have never slept near a leaking roof, but it is bright enough to pull people from cottages and barns. After so much grey road, even a modest row of stalls feels like a procession. You follow the pilgrim and peddler toward the fairground. The church tower rises behind it, and the market cross stands near the centre, garlanded with winter greenery that looks determined rather than festive. Booths sell bread, cheap knives, clay cups, ribbons, wooden combs, small charms, and pies with contents that no one discusses too closely. A man beats a small drum near a stall of painted masks. A woman sells hot ale with honey. Smoke drifts low, softening everything until the fair seems half made of breath. Then you see the stripes. A juggler stands near the cross wearing hose in alternating bands of red and yellow, one leg brighter than the other, as if two rival sunsets have quarrelled over his knees. His tunic is patched with narrow strips of green, brown, and faded blue. He tosses 3 wooden balls in the air while children, apprentices, and suspicious adults watch with the shared expression of people hoping for wonder, but prepared for theft. Beside him, a rope dancer wears a striped hood, and a peddler of dice has sleeves pieced from so many colours that he appears to have been assembled from festival leftovers. Striped cloth draws eyes differently from rich cloth. Purple makes people step back. Gold makes them bow or calculate. Red makes them glance twice. Stripes make them narrow their gaze. No one can quite agree whether striped garments are mistrusted because they break the plain order of cloth, because they are worn by performers and wanderers, or because people simply distrust anyone whose sleeves seem to be going in two directions at once. In some places, stripes cling to those on the edges. Entertainers, servants, outsiders, prisoners, fools, or people marked by custom more than choice. In other places, they are only fashion, cheerful and harmless. The trouble is that medieval eyes are very fond of turning difference into a warning. You stand near a stall selling wool caps and watch the juggler bow with a grin. His striped hose are mended at the ankle, and one red band has faded nearly pink. A boy laughs as the balls rise and fall. An old woman crosses herself, though whether from superstition or because the juggler nearly drops one on her basket is unclear. Some swear that motley clothing confuses evil spirits, since the eye cannot settle on where the person begins. Others say motley mostly confuses honest folk trying to decide whether to guard their purses. Even now, it is hard to tell which belief has more practical support. The peddler beside you opens his pack and lays out ribbons on a cloth plain blue, dull red, grey, brown, and a few striped bands woven in two colours. Young women touch them, pretend not to want them, then touch them again. A striped ribbon may be playful, especially at a fair, where ordinary rules loosen like belts after supper. Yet a married woman nearby murmurs that too much striping invites gossip, and gossip, unlike rain, does not always dry by morning. You move slowly through the crowd. A man with a patch-striped cloak sells dice from a wooden bowl, calling them lucky, which is exactly what unlucky dice would say if they could speak. Near him, a tinker in pieced garments repairs a pot with small rivets. His coat is a map of other coats: brown shoulder, green sleeve, grey skirt, red patch near the pocket. Such patchwork is sometimes necessity, sometimes craft, and sometimes a sign that a person has lived too long on roads where cloth is acquired by bargain, charity, or events best left vague. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether a patched wanderer is dangerous, unlucky, blessed, or merely cold. A town beadle appears at the edge of the fair, carrying a staff and wearing a sober dark tunic. He watches the dice seller, the juggler, and the striped sleeves with an expression carefully polished by suspicion. His gaze moves like a measuring rod. It pauses on the rope dancer's hood, the tinker's coat, the peddler's striped ribbons, the pilgrim badges, the dog stealing a dropped crust, and finally on you. Your cloak remains plain enough to be boring, which for once feels like protection. The beadle's presence changes the air slightly. Laughter lowers, hands move closer to purses. The juggler keeps smiling but tosses the balls a little lower. A performer's clothing is invitation and accusation at once. Bright, broken, striped, and motley garments announce skill, humour, movement, and difference. But they also remind settled folk that not everyone belongs neatly to a guild, manor, parish, or household. A person who travels between rules is often suspected of slipping through them. Near the churchyard wall, a group of boys, old enough to work but young enough to enjoy bad decisions, gather round a stall of cheap masks and striped hoods. One tries on a hood with long points, while another laughs until his mother catches him by the ear and removes both joy and merchandise from his future. She tells him that respectable folk do not dress like fools outside proper feast days. He argues that the fair is nearly a feast. She says nearly is where trouble lives. This is difficult to refute. You pause by a fire basket where chestnuts roast in a blackened pan. The smell is warm and sweet, mixing with wet wool, trampled grass, and hot ale. The grey pilgrim buys a small handful and shares them with you. The dog receives one, changes its mind about the texture, and deposits it discreetly on your boot. You accept this as part of the long education of the road. The pilgrim nods toward a man wearing a striped cloak of blue and white, standing alone near the fair's edge, a sailor's cast-off, perhaps, someone says. Another says he may have come from the coast. A third insists stripes like that mean bad luck at sea. No one can quite agree whether the man is interesting, suspicious, unlucky, or simply wearing what was available. He looks tired, and when he buys bread, he counts his coins carefully. You feel a quiet sympathy for him. Cloth speaks loudly. But it does not always speak truth. As the fair grows busier, colours mingle until the eye can no longer sort them into easy meanings. Brown workers laugh beside red-capped traders. Blue hoods pass under striped awnings. Grey pilgrims warm their hands beside green-ribboned girls. Black-coated officials stand near gold-painted saint tokens. Motley performers move between them all, gathering coins, jokes, suspicion, and crumbs. For a little while, the town becomes a woven thing, warp and weft, plain and patterned, each thread crossing another without asking permission. Yet the old judgments remain. When a purse goes missing, eyes turn first toward the dice seller, then the juggler, then the tinker in his patched coat. The lost purse is soon found beneath a bench, where its owner sat upon it with great moral confidence. Apologies are muttered, though not quite loudly enough. The juggler bows anyway, as if accepting both suspicion and relief as part of his fee. Medieval justice, you notice, is sometimes less a scale than a weather vane. By late afternoon, clouds gather again, and the fair begins to thin. The peddler folds his ribbons. The rope dancer removes her striped hood and wraps herself in a plain cloak. The dice seller vanishes before anyone can decide whether to invite him or accuse him. The beadle continues watching until there is almost nothing left to watch, which seems to disappoint him deeply. You leave the fairground with the grey pilgrim and the dog, passing the churchyard where cloth scraps stir on the branches beyond the wall. Behind you, striped awnings sag in the damp air, their bright bands muted by rain. You carry with you the uneasy lesson of the fair colours may honour, comfort, protect, and adorn, but they may also mark a person for laughter, longing, suspicion, or blame. A stripe is only a stripe until a village decides it is a story. Ahead, across the green, the innkeeper tells travellers that the manor road has flooded and the safer path bends toward a great hall where a feast is to be held before nightfall. Bells ring faintly from the church tower. Smoke lifts from chimneys. The grey sky lowers, and somewhere beyond the village, candlelight and coloured gowns are already gathering around long tables. You take the safer path as the innkeeper advises, though safer in this country seems to mean only that the mud is less ambitious and the ditches slightly less eager to inherit your boots. The grey pilgrim walks beside you for a while, his badges clicking under his cloak, but at a fork near a willow hedge he turns toward a roadside chapel, where he hopes to sleep beneath a roof blessed enough to discourage fleas. You part with quiet nods. The dog watches him go. Torn between loyalty and the possibility of supper in your direction, then chooses supper with the honesty of its species. The road toward the great hall bends across wet meadows and low fields where the last light lies thin as old pewter. Smoke rises ahead, not from one chimney but from many, and soon you hear the muted sounds of gathering wheels creaking, horses snorting, men calling across a yard, women laughing beneath their breath as they lift hems clear of mud. The hall belongs to a local lord whose name everyone seems to know, and no one says in quite the same tone. Some speak with respect, some with caution. One carter spits into the hedge after mentioning him, which may be a political opinion or only a comment on the weather. By the time you reach the outer yard, torches have been fixed in iron brackets along the wall, and their flames lean in the wind. Servants rush between kitchen, stable, and hall, carrying trenchers, baskets of coarse loaves, jugs of ale, platters covered with cloth, and bundles of fresh rushes for the floor. The air smells of roasted meat, onions, damp wool, horse sweat, hot bread, and the sharp green scent of herbs crushed underfoot. A bell rings somewhere within the house. Not a church bell, but a smaller household bell calling servants into motion. It has a nervous sound, as if it knows mistakes are already multiplying. Inside, the great hall glows with candlelight. Rushes have been newly strewn, mixed with sweet herbs, though the older smells of smoke and spilled ale remain underneath like memories no broom can reform. Long tables stretch below the dais, and at the high end, beneath a hanging cloth embroidered with beasts and vines, the Lord's family and honoured guests begin to gather. You are given a place far from the dais, which is sensible. Your cloak has seen too much road to sit near anyone wearing pearls. Here, colour becomes conversation without words. A woman in deep blue sits near a man whose sleeves are lined in red, and every glance between them seems carefully measured. A younger lady wears green at her cuffs, fresh and daring against a darker gown, and a maid whispers that she has lately been promised in marriage. No one can quite agree whether green at a feast blesses new love or invites old jealousy, but everyone agrees it is worth noticing. A knight's surcoat bears his lord's colours, and his belt buckle shines brass bright. A steward in sober black moves behind the benches, arranging rank as calmly as if he were sorting knives. You sit near merchants, lesser tenants, and a reeve with a face as lined as folded parchment. One merchant wears a red hood brushed clean for the occasion. Another has a blue cloak fastened with a pewter brooch shaped like a little saint. Their wives wear linen veils, carefully whitened and pinned, and gowns that have been turned, altered, and aired until they seem nearly new. A feast is a place where garments work hard. Cloth must honour the host, display the household, attract the right eyes, avoid the wrong envy, and survive gravy. This is a heavy burden for sleeves. Servants bring water for hand-washing. The basin reaches the high table first, then travels downward through rank and patience. A boy with a towel nearly trips over the sleeping hound near the hearth, and for one breath every person at the lower bench watches disaster prepare itself. He recovers. The hound does not wake. This may be the evening's first miracle. Food arrives in waves, pottage thick with barley, trenchers of bread, smoked fish, roasted fowl, onions, soft cheese, and a dish of stewed apples fragrant with spice. At the high table, finer meats appear, carried beneath covers with solemn importance. You eat slowly, letting warmth gather in your hands and belly. The dog waits beneath the bench, accepting fallen crumbs with the disciplined grace of a monk receiving relics. Across the hall, clothing declares alliances. Two men in the same household colours sit shoulder to shoulder, their matching sleeves making loyalty visible. A woman wears a narrow band of gold embroidery at her neckline, not enough to challenge the great ladies, but enough to remind others that her family has prospered. A young man in too bright red laughs a little too loudly near the green-cuffed lady, and her older aunt watches him with the calm expression of a falcon considering a mouse. Some swear that wearing red to a feast strengthens courage in matters of love. Others say it strengthens foolishness first and courage only if there is any room left. At the dais, a marriage bargain is murmured over wine. You cannot hear the words clearly, but you see the gestures: a father's ringed hand, a mother's lowered gaze, a folded cloth offered and admired, a glance toward the girl with green at her cuffs. Cloth here is part of negotiation. A bride may bring gowns, linen, veils, bedding, belts, and embroidered pieces into marriage, each item counted, valued, remembered. Love may be sung by poets, but households are joined with wool, land, coin, and chests that lock properly. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the feast is joyful or careful. Laughter rises, yes, and ale flows, and a fiddler near the wall plays a tune soft enough for tired feet to imagine dancing. Yet beneath the warmth lies measurement. Who sits where? Who wears what? Who receives the better cup? Who has fur at the collar, and who has only brushed the mud from a hem? Colour brightens the hall, but it also fixes everyone in place like pins on a cloth pattern. The priest from the household chapel blesses the meal's final course, his vestment edge catching candlelight with a thread of gold. You remember the abbey embroiderers and their careful hands. The line of gold flickers as he moves, and for a moment the high table seems almost holy, though the man beside you mutters that holiness improves greatly when served with stewed apples. You pretend not to hear, which is the gentlest form of agreement. Later, when cups have been refilled and the hall softens into contentment, a servant carries fresh candles to the dais, beeswax for the high tables, smoky tallow farther down. The colours of garments shift in the changing light. Red darkens to wine, blue sinks toward shadow, green softens like moss, black absorbs the glow, white linen gleams at throats and wrists. Gold waits until flame finds it, then answers. You lean back on the bench, warm and drowsy, listening to the crackle of the hearth and the low braid of voices. The dog sleeps across your boots, near the dais. The green-cuffed young woman lowers her eyes while her aunt speaks with the red-sleeved man's father. No one can quite agree whether this night will be remembered as a happy beginning, a practical arrangement, or merely the feast where a kitchen boy did not fall over a hound. All seem possible. At last. The steward claps softly, and servants begin clearing trenchers. Cloaks are gathered. Guests rise slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth. Outside, rain has started again, tapping against shutters and roof tiles. You are offered a place to sleep along the lower wall, beneath a wool blanket that smells of smoke and cedar chips. As you settle, the feast colours blur into candle haze loyalty, wealth, courtship, ambition, devotion, all folded into gowns and sleeves, all glowing briefly before night covers them. Beyond the hall, somewhere in the darkness, water runs through lanes and ditches toward the dyer's quarter, where vats wait under rain, full of secrets strong enough to stain a kingdom. Rain keeps speaking after the hall has gone quiet, tapping on the roof tiles, sliding from eaves, and running in thin threads down the dark outside walls. You lie beneath the wool blanket near the lower end of the great hall, where the rushes smell of herbs, old smoke, and the evening's feast. The hearth has been banked, but a red glow remains under ash. Around you, travellers and servants breathe in slow, uneven rhythms, wrapped in cloaks, tucked beside benches, folded into whatever corner warmth has spared. For a while, you sleep. Then a bell rings somewhere beyond the hall, small and sharp in the wet dark. Not the monastery bell, not the parish bell, but the household bell calling someone to rise before dawn, has properly considered the matter. A servant crosses the hall with a candle shielding the flame. The dog lifts its head, decides the situation lacks food, and returns to sleep. You wake fully when the steward's keys click near the door. That sound has followed you from the manor, and now here it is again, iron against iron, order against drowsiness. A few travellers must leave early before the road worsens, and you, having slept in your cloak and therefore already dressed by medieval standards, rise with them. Your limbs complain softly. The blanket releases you with reluctance. Outside, the rain has settled into a steady grey fall, and the yard is a churn of hoofprints, puddles, straw, and resigned humanity. The road ahead bends toward the dyer's quarter of the nearby town, where cloth from manors, abbeys, merchants, and humble households passes through vats, hands, secrets, and smells before returning in colours that may change a person standing in a room. You walk under the dim morning, your hood low, boots sinking into mud at each step. The dog trots at your side, now speckled with rain and looking less like a companion than a damp moral lesson. By the time you reach the town ditch, the smell arrives before the walls do. It is sharp, sour, smoky, and strangely warm, a mixture of wet wool, stale urine, wood ash, boiling bark, fermented plants, vinegar, mordants, and something you prefer not to name because the morning is already doing its best. Medieval dyeing is not a delicate art performed by graceful hands in sunlit courtyards. It is heat, steam, stains, trade secrets, and water that no sensible duck would trust. You pass through a postern gate near the river, where the dyers work away from the finest streets, though not far enough away for everyone's liking. Low workshops lean over channels of moving water. Smoke rises from roofs. Wooden frames stand under awnings, hung with wet cloth in muted strips of yellow, red, green, blue, brown, and uncertain shades between. Rain drips from the hanging lengths, turning the ground beneath them into coloured mud. A man carrying a pole of soaked wool pauses and tells you to mind your sleeve. You obey at once. On this street, one careless brush against a vat may make a traveller look fashionable by accident and suspicious by noon. No one can quite agree whether dyers are craftsmen, magicians, sinners, geniuses, or neighbours best placed downwind. Their work changes the visible world, and that alone makes people uneasy. A bolt of plain wool enters a vat looking dull as a winter sheep and comes out with a redness fit for a merchant's hood, or a blue suitable for a parish feast, or a green that suggests the wearer has either youth, wealth, or very poor judgment around puddles. Such transformations invite admiration. They also invite gossip. You stop beneath an awning where a master dyer stands beside 3 steaming vats. His apron is stained in layers, like a history of every colour that ever lost an argument with him. His hands are reddish at the nails, dark in the creases, and his sleeves have been rolled high. A younger apprentice stirs one vat with a wooden paddle, face tight with concentration. The liquid within is not bright. It looks brown, murky, and thoroughly unpromising. The dyer notices your stare and gives a small, dry smile. Colours, you begin to learn, do not always look like themselves at first. Woad may need air before blue blooms from greenish water. Madder roots may yield reds that shift with the mordant. Weld may give yellow, but yellow may fade, and green often requires layering one colour over another with the patience of a saint and the vocabulary of a sailor. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the dyer's art is more science, memory, habit, or stubbornness. The dyer himself seems to believe it is mostly not being interrupted by fools. A woman arrives with a bundle of cloth tied in linen. She's a merchant's wife, perhaps, or a servant trusted with a costly errand. She opens the bundle to reveal a faded gown that has lost its strength of colour through years of wear. The dyer pinches the cloth between finger and thumb, rubs it, sniffs it, holds it toward the rain-dark light, and shakes his head in a way that suggests both professional judgment and a desire to charge extra. Some swear that old cloth remembers its first colour and resists being changed. Others say old cloth simply wears thin, and thin cloth dislikes ambition. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but everyone agrees that re-dyeing is cheaper than buying new fabric, if the cloth survives the insult. Farther down the lane, apprentices spread wet wool over frames to dry. The rain makes this a philosophical exercise. One boy carries a bucket of mordant so carefully he appears to be transporting a royal infant with worse smell. Another feeds wood beneath a copper cauldron. Steam rolls into the street, softening the outlines of buildings and people until everyone looks half-dyed by the air itself. A guild mark hangs above one doorway, crossed paddles painted on a board. Beneath it, two men argue quietly over measures, weights, and whether a certain batch was spoiled by poor water, weak dye, or a neighbour's curse. Guild rules shape much of this quarter. Who may dye what? Who may sell certain colours? Who may apprentice? Who may use particular vats? Who must pay fines for short measure, false colour, or cloth that fades before a customer has finished boasting about it? No one can quite agree whether guilds protect honest craft or protect craftsmen from too much honesty. Like most useful things, they do both depending on who is holding the ledger. You watch as a length of cloth is lifted from a vat. It emerges heavy, dripping, and dark, not yet the colour it will become. The dyer and apprentice stretch it between them, and the air begins its work. Slowly, almost shyly, blue gathers across the surface. It is like watching evening return in reverse, like seeing the sky decide to settle into wool. The apprentice does not smile, but his shoulders ease. The dyer grunts. This may be praise. In this quarter. Approval is apparently measured in grunts of varying generosity. The dog, meanwhile, has found a warm place beneath a cart and is licking something from its paw. You choose trust over investigation. Near the river steps, women rinse cloth in water running brown and blue around their wrists. Their gowns are tucked high, their feet bare despite the cold, their hands reddened by work. One wears a charm of rowan wood at her neck, saying it keeps the dye from taking badly. Another says the true charm is using clean water upstream before the tanners ruin it. This, too, sounds like wisdom. Medieval towns often place unpleasant trades near water, then act surprised when the water develops opinions. By midday, the rain slackens. Wet cloth hangs everywhere, red like diluted wine, yellow like old straw, blue like stormlight, green like moss under eaves, blackish wool drying in a guarded corner. The colours are not yet splendid. They are vulnerable, dripping, watched, and expensive. A single ruined batch can mean debt. A secret recipe can feed a family. A rare shade can cross from workshop to manor to chapel and become, under candles, a sign of holiness or rank. Yet here it begins in steam. Sourness, stained hands, and apprentices trying very hard not to drop things. You leave the dyer's quarter with the smell clinging to your cloak so firmly it may ask for lodging. Behind you, vats boil, paddles turn, and guildsmen mutter over accounts. Ahead, the lane climbs toward the town wall, where evening will come early under clouds. The day has taught you that every colour has a hidden labour beneath it, and every bright sleeve carries a darker story of roots, minerals, urine, smoke, river water, fines, failures, and hands that may never wear what they make. As you reach the higher street, a bell begins to toll the late hour. Watchfires are being prepared along the wall. Night will soon draw colour out of the world, leaving only shape, warmth, rank, fear, and the memory of cloth against skin. You climb from the dyer's quarter with rain still shining on the stones, and the smell of vats following you like an unwanted travelling companion with excellent stamina. The town above is beginning to dim. Shutters close one by one, their wooden thuds softened by mist. A woman pulls a basket from the street before the night carts pass. A boy gathers rushes from a doorway and shakes them into the gutter, releasing the old scent of herbs, dust, and everyone's boots, above the roofs. The late bell tolls again, and its sound rolls outward toward the wall, where watchfires are being coaxed into life. Night changes cloth before it changes anything else. The red caps in the square lose their boldness. Blue hoods become little more than folded shadow. Green ribbons disappear unless they catch torchlight at just the right breath. Brown, grey, and black merge together until rank must be read by movement, voice, escort, and the angle at which others step aside. Colour does not vanish completely, but it retreats, leaving behind texture fur at a collar, damp wool at a hem, linen pale at a throat, gold thread briefly flashing like a trapped spark. You follow a lane toward the wall, where travellers hoping to leave before dawn gather near the guardhouse. The dog pads beside you, nose low, perhaps searching for crumbs, perhaps studying the moral condition of the town through mud. At the corner, a lantern swings above an iron bracket, and beneath it an old woman sells little bundles of herbs tied with thread. She has rosemary for remembrance, rue for protection, sage for cleansing, and a few twists of dried lavender for those who wish their sleeping place to smell less like an argument between feet and straw. Some swear that carrying herbs in the lining of a cloak keeps night vapours away. Others say it only makes a wet cloak smell politely ill. No one can quite agree, but the bundles sell all the same. You buy a small twist of rosemary, more for comfort than conviction, and tuck it inside your cloak. Its scent rises faintly when you move, clean and sharp against the dye stink clinging to your sleeves. The old woman glances at the dog and says, "Animals see colours in the dark better than people see truth in daylight. This may be wisdom, nonsense, or a sales technique. In the Middle Ages, the borders between these are lightly guarded. At the wall, the watch is changing. Men in heavy cloaks gather near a brazier while a sergeant counts them by lantern glow. Their clothing is mostly dark practical wool, leather belts, hoods drawn low, mittens patched at the thumb. A few wear the Lord's colours in narrow strips at the sleeve or cap, but in the night those colours are only suggestions. What matters now is the glint of spearheads, the creak of leather, the warmth of shared fire, and whether a man stays awake when fog rises from the ditch. The sergeant wears a cloak lined with old fur, rubbed thin at the shoulders. He stands with his back to the fire, saving the heat for his spine while pretending this is leadership. His face is carved by weather, and when he looks over the gathered travellers, you feel the same measuring gaze you have met at gates, markets, manors, and fairs. Hood, boots, belt, hands, bag, dog. Always the dog earns a second look, perhaps because it has no clear trade, no visible master, and no respect for jurisdiction. Beyond the wall, fields lie in darkness. A road runs pale under the moon, vanishing between hedges toward distant woods. Watchfires burn along the parapet, each flame bending in the wind. The town behind you exhales smoke through chimneys, and the river below carries away the day's refuse, dye water, secrets, and possibly several opinions about human cleanliness. You wait near the guardhouse with other travellers, a carter whose cloak is so soaked it hangs like a defeated sail. 2 merchants wrapped in dark mantles, a woman carrying a linen-covered basket, and a young messenger with a red lining in his hood that flashes whenever he turns his head. In daylight, that red might have made him seem bold. Here, by watchfire, it looks almost like a warning ember. He keeps touching a leather pouch at his belt. Perhaps a letter, perhaps coins, perhaps the sort of private worry that gains weight after sunset. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about night colours. Some say black cloth hides a traveller from thieves. Others insist white linen under a cloak catches moonlight and attracts wandering spirits. Some swear red thread at the wrist guards against fear, while blue sewn inside the collar steadies the soul. A guard nearby says the best protection is a sharp knife, a dry tinder box, and not walking alone like a lost turnip. His view lacks poetry but has a sturdy shape. The gate is not opened for everyone. After dark, passage becomes a privilege negotiated through reason, coin, rank, urgency, or the sergeant's mood. The 2 merchants present a token from the guild hall. The messenger shows a sealed strip of parchment. The woman with the basket names a hamlet and an ailing sister. The carter says his load must reach the mill by morning. You say little, letting your plain cloak, tired face, and the dog's expression of ancient hardship speak for you. The sergeant considers all this, then waves you toward the waiting group with the weary generosity of a man who knows the night will be troublesome, whether or not he approves of it. When the gate opens, it does so with a groan of wood and iron that seems too loud for the hour. You pass beneath the arch and out into the cold. The sound of the town dulls at once behind you. Ahead, the road smells of wet earth, hedge leaves, and distant smoke. The dog moves closer. The messenger walks a few paces ahead, red lining briefly visible, then gone. The woman's basket cloth glows pale in the moonlight. The merchants keep together, their dark mantles almost one shape. The carter's wheels suck softly at the mud. Night walking is a slow lesson in humility. Every rut may be a puddle, every puddle may be deeper than pride, and every hedge may contain either harmless twigs or something with opinions. You keep to the centre of the road when you can. The watchfire behind you grows smaller, then joins the other lights along the wall, till the town seems less a place than a necklace of embers laid against the dark. Without daylight, clothing becomes memory. You remember the brown wool of labourers and the way it held the earth. You remember blue under the church bell, red under market canvas, green at the forest fire, black fur in the manor hall, white linen in the sick room, purple behind locks, gold thread beneath abbey candles, grey cloaks on the pilgrim road, stripes at the fair, feast colours blurred by smoke, and the dyer's wet cloth waiting to become itself. All of them travel with you now, folded into thought. The darkness has taken their brightness, but not their meaning. The road turns beside a small shrine where a candle burns inside a niche, protected by a horn pane. Its little flame makes the painted saint above it tremble in and out of sight. The woman with the basket pauses, touches the linen cover, and murmurs something too soft to hear. The messenger bows his head briefly. The merchants do not stop, but one touches a charm beneath his cloak. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people fear the night itself, the things within it, or the thoughts that grow too large when there is nothing bright to look at. You rest there for a moment, grateful for the candle. The dog sniffs the base of the shrine and finds no doctrine, only damp stone. A scrap of blue cloth is tied to a nail beside the niche, and below it hangs a strip of black thread, perhaps left for mourning, protection, or a promise no one else remembers. In moonlight, both are nearly the same colour. Far off, another bell rings from an abbey hidden beyond the fields. Its note is faint but steady, a silver thread drawn through the dark. The travellers move again, slower now. Frost begins to gather on the road edges. Breath turns white before faces. Cloaks are pulled tighter. The messenger no longer looks bold. The merchants no longer look rich. The carter no longer looks poor. The woman's basket, the dog's ears, your own cold hands, everything becomes simple under the night sky. Yet even in darkness, rank and faith cling to cloth. The merchants still guard their mantles from mud. The messenger still protects his pouch beneath his hood. The woman still keeps the linen cover clean. You still touch the rosemary in your cloak, pretending not to believe in it while feeling better because it is there. The Middle Ages does not ask belief to be tidy. It asks only that you walk carefully, keep warm, and respect bells when they speak across fields. The road descends toward a low bridge where water moves black beneath planks. On the far side, an abbey lamp glows in the distance, small and patient. Dawn is not yet near, but the world has begun to lean toward it. You cross one by one, boots hollow on wood, cloaks whispering, dog claws clicking lightly behind. The night gathers around you like a great dark garment, and ahead, beyond the fields, the first unseen brothers are rising to dress for prayer. You cross the low bridge in single file, the planks damp beneath your boots, the black water murmuring below as though it is repeating news from places too far downstream to matter now. The dog steps lightly behind you, claws clicking on wood, then hurries forward once all four paws meet solid earth again. Ahead, the abbey lamp glows beyond the fields, small and steady, a warm bead of light held inside the cold bowl of night. The travellers spread out as the road widens. The merchants keep to the firmer ground near the hedge. The carter mutters to his horse, whose ears flick back with the weary patience of an animal that has heard every human complaint and found none original. The messenger walks ahead with his hood drawn close, the red lining no longer visible. The woman with the linen-covered basket keeps one hand over the cloth, protecting it from mist. Everyone has grown quieter. Night has a way of taking the loose threads of talk and tucking them under. The abbey bell rings before dawn, one clear note, then another, calling the brothers from sleep to prayer. The sound crosses the fields slowly, touching frost, hedge, road, cloak, and breath. You feel it in your chest before it fades. No one can quite agree whether bells drive away spirits, mark holy time, warn the careless, or simply remind tired bodies that someone else is awake and keeping order. Tonight, or rather this almost morning, the bell seems to do all of these things gently. You reach the abbey gate while the sky is still dark blue at the edges. A lay brother opens the wicket with a lantern in hand. He knows the merchants, nods to the woman, frowns at the dog, and allows everyone inside with the resigned mercy of someone who has seen stranger things arrive before sunrise. The courtyard is quiet but not asleep. A novice carries water from the well, his breath clouding in front of him. Another brings armfuls of rushes toward the guest house. From the bakehouse comes the first warm smell of bread, faint but real, the sort of smell that makes faith seem suddenly practical. You follow the others toward the church, not because anyone commands you, but because light spills there, and bells have a way of gathering feet. The stone threshold is worn hollow by generations of sandals, boots, bare feet, and all the ordinary sorrows that have crossed it. Inside, the abbey church is dim, long, and cold. Candles burn near the altar. Their flames tremble in the draughts, reflected faintly on polished metal, painted wood, and the edge of a hanging cloth worked with gold thread. The monks enter in order, robes falling around them in soft folds undyed wool, dark habits, plain belts, simple hoods. Their clothing has none of the market's boast, none of the manor's furred authority, none of the locked purple splendour, yet it carries a kind of power made from repetition. Cloth worn the same way each day becomes almost like a bell itself, marking a life measured by prayer, labour, meals, silence, sleep, and prayer again. Near the altar, vestments lie ready. White linen covers the table. A darker robe rests beside it, with a border where gold thread catches the candlelight. There is a band of blue, a trace of red, perhaps green worked into vine leaves, and a lining so deep it might be purple or merely shadow pretending to be noble. Even now, it is hard to tell where colour ends and candlelight begins. The abbey does not display colour like a fair or a feast. It lets colour appear slowly, as if holiness prefers not to hurry. You stand at the back with the travellers. The merchants bow their heads. The woman sets her basket carefully by her feet. The carter leans against a pillar and immediately looks as if prayer is the only thing keeping him upright. The dog curls beneath the bench, having understood that churches are excellent places for waiting, provided one is patient and not too interested in doctrine. The chanting begins low and even. It rises from the monks like breath from the earth, not loud, not dramatic, but steady enough to soften the edges of the dark. Their robes move as they turn, kneel, stand, and bow. Pale linen flashes at cuffs. Wool folds into shadow. The gold border gleams only when the priest steps near the candles. You remember the embroiderer's patient hands, the dyer's sour vats, the labourer's brown wool, the blue thread tied at the shrine. The red cloth folded under market canvas, the green ribbon trembling on the hawthorn, the black fur in the manor hall, the grey pilgrim badges, the striped fairground sleeves, the feast gowns blurred by smoke. All of them seem to arrive here quietly, not as noise, but as memory. Some swear that when morning prayer is sung before sunrise, the world listens more closely because it has not yet put on its daily distractions. Others say the world is simply too cold to do otherwise. You stand still and let both ideas rest together. The chant fills the nave. The bell's last echo fades into stone. The candles burn lower, golden at the heart, blue at the base, each flame dressed in its own small robe of light. As the service ends, the first true grey of dawn enters through the narrow windows. It washes over the monks' robes, the white altar linen, the gold thread, the worn stones, the travellers' muddy hems, your own tired hands. Colour returns gently, without pride. Brown becomes brown again. Grey separates from black. A strip of blue wakes near the altar. Red darkens in the messenger's hood. The linen over the woman's basket glows softly. The dog opens one eye, as if dawn has personally disturbed it, then closes it again. You step outside into the abbey yard. The sky is pale now, and frost lies on the grass like powdered glass. Smoke rises straight from the bakehouse chimney. Somewhere, bread is being taken from an oven. Somewhere, a brother sweeps fresh rushes over a stone floor. Somewhere, a scribe with ink-stained fingers bends over parchment while the day gathers itself around him. The world has not become easier. Roads remain muddy. Cloth remains costly. Winter remains intimate with everyone's bones. But the colours have shown you their secret. They are not merely brightness laid over life. They are life itself, dyed, washed, mended, blessed, guarded, envied, and worn close against the skin. You sit for a while on a low stone bench near the cloister, your cloak wrapped around you, the rosemary still tucked inside its fold. The dog settles against your boot. The bell is quiet now. The morning is very still. The abbey yard grows softer as the light spreads. The sharp edges of the night loosen from the roofs, the walls, the bare trees, and the little path where frost melts into silver beads. You breathe in smoke, bread, cold stone, and damp wool, and all of it feels calmer now, as if the long road has folded itself into one warm corner of memory. There is no need to hurry. The colours rest with you. Brown earth beneath the fields, blue prayer in the church shadows, red warmth under ash, green sleep in the hedges, black dignity in folded wool, white linen laid gently over tired hands, purple hidden in quiet chests, gold trembling in candlelight, grey road dust on every traveller who keeps walking. The dog sighs, and the sound is small enough to belong to the morning. Somewhere behind the cloister wall, a wooden door closes softly, a candle gutters out, a monk's footsteps fade along stone. You let your shoulders grow heavy beneath the cloak. You let the cold become distant. You let the bell, the road, the market, the hall, the forest, and the rain drift away one by one. The medieval world remains around you, but it no longer asks anything. It only glows faintly, like thread seen by the last candle before sleep. You are safe beside the old stones. The bread is warm, the yard is quiet, the sky is pale, and as the colours of the world settle into stillness, you may close your eyes and rest, wrapped in darkness as soft as wool, while dawn waits patiently beyond the window,